Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation to be along. As you can tell from the accent, I come from New Zealand, and we have forests there. And I used to work for the Department of Conservation New Zealand, looking after the national parks. And I know the amount of work that it takes to manage and protect a forest. I can't believe the amount of work that goes into creating a forest in the first place. I'm just absolutely in awe. Right, first of all, is me, Tourism Alliance. We're an umbrella trade association for the tourism industry. We pull together destination management organisations, trade associations and membership organisations, be they inbound, outbound, domestic, charitable, you name it, they're kind of members of ours. We've got 55 members, and these member organisations represent about 200,000 businesses out of about 265,000 businesses in the tourism sector. Our purpose is to lobby government. That's pretty much what it says on the can. So my day is kind of spent in and around Whitehall, talking to officials, talking to ministers, talking to MPs about the tourism industry and the benefits that it brings to the UK economy. Right, rural tourism. There's the stats, basically. Rural tourism is 20% of domestic tourism, it's 22% of day visits, and 18% of overseas visitors actually go to a rural destination while they're in the country. So basically, you're talking about a fifth of all tourism in the UK relates to the rural environment. And the interesting thing about that is looking back over the stats before I came along here today, it's been absolutely stable within kind of 1 or 2% for each of these over the last kind of 15 years, which you may think, yeah, we're not really growing that much. But the thing is, if you consider the budgets of DMOs or destinations or businesses in rural areas, and then you compare it to the budgets of EasyJet, Ryanair, the big cities, the overseas destinations, that you're holding your own against all that competition with all those marketing budgets being thrown at it is quite an incredible achievement, which just goes to show that the underlying resource that you've got is something that people really kind of cling to dearly. So you're more than punching your weight. So what does those 20% kind of mean? Well, it means that there are 20 million trips by people to rural destinations each year in the UK, an incredible 335 million day visits to rural areas. In fact, the 20.7 billion that gets spent in the rural economy through tourism is the biggest private sector transfer of wealth from urban to rural areas. It outweighs the amount of money that goes into rural areas through agriculture these days. So it is kind of, in the way, the lifeblood of kind of rural areas is people kind of coming from cities and visiting. And that creates 380,000 jobs. Now, that 380,000 jobs, just as a comparison, there are now about 330,000 jobs in agriculture in the UK. So the jobs created by tourism in rural areas actually outweigh the number of jobs created in agriculture. And the disproportion is actually only going to get kind of bigger over time, because what's going to happen in the future is that there's continuing pressure on farms to get larger, to be more productive, to kind of get in more automation and machinery. That's going to be an ongoing trend. So kind of agricultural jobs will probably continue to fall, whereas tourism is a service industry. You cannot outsource it, you cannot mechanize it to any great extent. It is always kind of going to be the personal touch that gets you through. And so what we'll see in the future is that tourism will continue to rise in terms of economic and employment value to the rural economy compared to agriculture. Okay, tourism trends. These are the kind of the macro trends that are happening at the moment as we see them. Safety is a key issue. The more people look at where they want to go, the more they want to feel safe in their destination. We're seeing it kind of with people going overseas at the moment. The destinations they want to go to are kind of in Western Europe. They don't want to go to Eastern Europe. Even in the UK at the moment, it's been absolutely fascinating. If you're a business in Zone 1 in London, you had quite a bad year last year. You were kind of down about 10, 15%. If you were placed just out of kind of Zone 1, for example, Hampton Court Palace, you had a really good year. And people just kind of moving away from kind of the central city locations where they think that something might happen. And it's almost a kind of an unsaid thing and a subconscious thing, but that's what they're trending to do. People are doing more and less. They're taking more holidays, but they're taking them for shorter time. Sharon Orrell, who works for Visit England, who's absolutely fantastic researcher, describes it as being in a lolly shop. You know, instead of buying one big bar, you're buying individual lollies, and you want as kind of many as you can, but you'll kind of take little ones at a time. Have a little treat every now and again, rather than the 2-week holiday a year. They're wanting added value. Everything now is kind of based on voucher and Groupon, things like that. How can I get the best possible deal? What else are you going to offer me? Some research that was done by Sharon a couple of years back showed that 26% of people would take more holidays if there was an added value attraction. So if two kind of businesses got together and gave me a proposition that I couldn't refuse, I would be kind of 25% more likely to take it. Trophy hunting. We used to have trophy hunting in the way that you kind of went somewhere, you saw the local attraction, you took a photo of it, you took it home, you showed your friends. I've been there, I've done that. There is still trophy hunting, but the trophy hunting these days is experiential trophy hunting. It's, I had an experience that you haven't had that makes you jealous of what I did. And that's the trophy hunting that people do today. And the interesting thing that's happening at the moment is we've had kind of the OTAs, online travel agents, kind of consolidating their hold on the market for accommodation over recent years. What Airbnb is doing at the moment is getting into Airbnb trips. So what they're trying to do is the same thing with the experience. They're getting people in local areas to put their experiential offering online with them, and they're trying to kind of grab that part of the market. So it's something very much to be aware of. You can fight it, or you can see it as an opportunity and offer your experience kind of online through Airbnb. And that's going to be the way of the future. So let's have a look at some negative trends as they relate to rural tourism. City breaks. 2 years ago, city breaks in the UK outperformed seaside and rural breaks for the first time ever. And the same thing happened in Europe. And so while there has been a kind of a want to get away from cities and outside, people are now doing more city-to-city kind of trips. And the reason for that is, like I said before, because people are taking more trips and shorter trips, they're not traveling as far from the point of entry to a destination as they once were. So there's limited opportunity for them to actually go out and explore. They'll stay at the gateway location. So if you're a kind of a gateway location internationally or even nationally, you're a kind of a travel hub, you're going to do well in future, whereas kind of rural areas will have to fight a little bit more to get people out and about. And that's kind of lies in with the short stay. Connectivity is obviously your mobile phone. People cannot get away from their mobile phone these days, and their kids cannot actually be surgically removed from them. Yet, if you do not have Wi-Fi, if you do not have kind of a broadband, it is very hard to compete these days. It's not just for your business and kind of your upload, download speeds. It is that kind of everyone that you have to your place wants to be on the internet as well, and that's where the real pressure is coming. Okay, so those are the things you're fighting against at the moment. But you've got a lot of things in your favor. Key trend, authenticity and experience, as mentioned before. Authenticity is becoming increasingly harder to get for people in the kind of globalized environment. You go down to High Street in any city, there are the same stores. The architecture is increasingly the same, glass buildings. To try and find kind of regional distinctiveness and regional authenticity, increasingly you've got to get out of cities, go to kind of rural villages, destinations, and that's where you have it all over them. And also on the experience, there is far more to do in a rural environment than in a city environment, because everyone's been to bars, everyone's been to clubs. You can't brag about that so much, but you can really brag about going carriage driving. Food, increasingly important, especially in regional distinctiveness. Again, people want to brag about that, and trying to kind of link in with kind of local food, local products, get that local distinctiveness going. Again, that's a big trend. And the final one is photography. And I'm not talking about people wandering around with SLRs. I'm talking about people walking around with one of these. I traveled through South America about 10 years back. And before I went, I bought myself a Whizzy digital camera. It had 7 million pixels, and I thought it was the dog's bollocks. This old jobby has 13 million. A good one of these today will have 20 million pixels. What people are doing with them is everyone is now a photographer. You can take fantastic photos on your mobile phone, and what people want to do is take fantastic photos on their mobile phone and Skype to their friends about them on Facebook. So if you're out in the countryside, you have got the scenery, you've got the experiences, you can provide them with those fantastic photos that they're going to take on their mobile phone and post to all their friends. And that's pretty much your marketing done for you. Right, what's tourism going to do this year? These are 2 of the only 3 figures you ever need to know about tourism. The first one is the price elasticity of inbound tourism. So what it means is that if the cost of a holiday goes up or down because of the exchange rate, there is an opposite reaction of 1.3% in the other direction. So with a 15% fall in the value of the pound against overseas currencies, you would expect kind of 1.3 times 15 equals 20% increase in overseas revenue. It won't all happen in the first year. What we find is it happens over 3 years because it takes time to filter through to people overseas that it's now good value to come here. So you expect half of that in the first year. So we would expect about a 10% increase in overseas revenue coming into the UK this year, which is just under about £2 billion. And £2 billion, and here's the other figure that's not on there, if you divide any amount of tourism revenue get to an area by 54,000, you will get the number of jobs that the increase in tourism will generate. So if you've got £2 billion of extra revenue coming into the country, divide it by 54, and if anyone can do the maths on that, it's a lot of jobs. It's actually 37,000 jobs. So that's kind of the scale of the increase. Domestically, you get the same type of effect because it's too expensive to go overseas, so more people stay at home. However, because people in the UK think that kind of, you know what, I really want some sun and beach activity, if the cost has gone up in Europe, you know what, I'll just kind of suck it in and go on holiday. So their elasticity is lower than inbound. because inbound people can go to any other destination in the world if they want. So if you times 15% by 0.8, you get something like a 12% increase. Take a little bit off that because people have commitments, but you'd still expect around a 10% increase in revenue this year, and that's another kind of 37,000 jobs. So basically, just on inbound and domestic tourism, you're talking about 70-odd thousand jobs going to be generated this year. It's going to be a phenomenal year. Touch wood, unless something goes hideously wrong. And of course, always things go hideously wrong. On Brexit, there's been a huge amount of activity. We did a number of surveys through members. They came up with three things that they want out of Brexit. One is to retain EU travel arrangements so people can continue to travel freely back and forth between the UK and Europe as tourists. They want to maintain access to EU national workers. And the figures I gave you about 76,000 new jobs going to be generated this year. When you've got unemployment of less than 5%, where are those jobs going to come from? Where are the people going to come from? And what we found is that as the employment level has decreased in the UK, our dependence on EU workers has gone through the roof. Although there is only 11% of workers in the UK tourism industry who are EU nationals at the moment, which comes as a surprise to a lot of people, over the last 3 years, 46% of new employees in the tourism industry have been EU nationals. So it's not like the EU nationals have come across and taken everyone's jobs, it's that we've basically run out of British people for tourism jobs. So we're heavily reliant. The other thing is to maintain access to EU funding programs and then smoothly replace them with UK versions. And I'll get on to that in a sec. There's two opportunities that I see that on the horizon through Brexit for rural tourism. One's the replacement cap program and one's the package travel directive. So the replacement cap program, we've been through the figures of 21 billion, 380,000 jobs. Even though tourism is as important, if not more important, than agriculture in the rural economy these days, through the CAP program at the moment, tourism businesses are only eligible for about 2.7% of CAP funding. So there is a real discord between the importance of the sector and the eligibility of it for funding through CAP. So what we need to do is to replace the CAP scheme with a UK version of it, but one that takes real account of what's going on in the rural economy and where the growth is and where the employment opportunities are in future. But it's not to say that we're bigger and better than agriculture, because increasingly the farmer is the tourism person. They're the person who's providing all the opportunities for fishing, walking. The B&B owner is the farmer. You cannot pull these people apart anymore. So we also rely on it, because if you cut down CAP funding too much for farming, what tends to happen are two things. One, that you're putting pressure on farmers to become more productive and therefore have large farms, which means pressure on hedgerows and stone wall fences and the things that make the rural landscape the attractant to tourists that it is at the moment. And the other thing is, if you force out farmers, of course, the attractiveness of the rural landscape gets downgraded. So it's going to be a complex issue, but tourism needs to be front and central in that discussion. The other thing that we're working on, and here's some homework for you. Sometime between Wednesday, tomorrow, with the budget and the end of the month, the government will put out a consultation on the package travel regulations. Now, you may not have ever heard of the package travel regulations, but they were developed to support people who take holidays overseas. Two main things is that if you injure yourself or get injured by someone overseas, you can seek recourse through the UK system rather than having to go through the system in an overseas country. The second thing is if your tour operator goes bust, you get repatriated back to the UK. Problem is, it also affects domestic tourism, because if you have two of three things, either accommodation, transport, or another tourism activity, if you bundle two of those three together, you are deemed to be a tour operator. And there are two things that come with being a tour operator. The first is that you either have to be bonded, or if you're not bonded, you put the client's money in a trust account, and you cannot use it until the customer has been on holiday and gone home, and then you can take the money out, which for a small business kind of ruins the cash flow. The second thing, which is even more problematic, is that if you, for example, are a B&B owner and you want to provide a product, say, come stay at my BB and I will give you free tickets to Chalk Abbey and you can come here and visit. If you come here and visit and you fall off the stage and break your leg, it's the B&B owner who gets sued, because he's the person who sold you the package of the accommodation and the ticket to come to Chalk Abbey. And that's a really off-putting proposition for a lot of small businesses, that they could be sued for something that's totally out of their hands. So there is consultation. What we want to do is basically have a sunset clause and say, you know what, after we're out of the EU, this shouldn't apply to domestic tourism. Fine for it on international, there's a really good purpose there, but domestically, get rid of it. And the work that I've done with Visit Britain suggests that if we get rid of the package travel regulations relating to domestic holidays, we can increase domestic tourism by 3.6 billion a year, which is quite a prize. And that's it. Thank you.